Welcome, people of planet Earth and all planets beyond. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Josh, and this is a breakdown of the vintage clothing in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the 1980s teen classic. This video is sponsored by Defunct.com, the best place for t-shirt enthusiasts. More about them later. Fast Times at Ridgemont High was a sensation in the early 80s, featuring actors Sean Penn as Jeff Spicoli, and even featuring Nicolas Cage in his film debut, though all of his lines were cut mysteriously. The film's wardrobe director was Marilyn, Vance, who also directed the wardrobe for movies like Pretty Woman and Die Hard. The movie features vintage gems all the way through the movie, and especially at the very last scene, which is an infamous scene in 80s cinema. Totally awesome vintage t-shirts. Also, one of the biggest shoe brands in the world traces their success back to this very film. So the movie opens up on a classic 1980s mall scene. We're seeing all the young people in all of their 80s glory, including these two Pat Benatar lookalikes fighting over some clothes in a department store. Pat Benatar is going to be sort of a recurring joke, even though I love Pat Benatar, she's my queen. Then we can see some of the first clothing that we are going to identify, and those are these pairs of Adolfo and Calvin Klein jeans. In the late 70s into the early 80s, smaller companies began to compete with the giants like Levi's, Leigh, and Wrangler by producing their jeans overseas. Not all of them, but most of them were doing this. And they were on top of trend. They were getting all the tightest and highest rise jeans into production, and they were all the rage with women at the time. It's going to be interesting. You'll see sort of a dichotomy here of women wearing these smaller fashion brands like Gloria Vanderbilt and Sassoon, but also men wearing the traditional brands like Levi's and Wrangler. But then the real fun begins here. In the first day of high school, we see all kinds of cool clothing here. First, I want to point out this Bob Dylan looking guy. I don't know who made this shirt or whatever, but this Western shirt is just absolutely stupid cool. Now inside the halls of this high school, we can see our first t-shirt, and that is this Van Halen 1980 Invasion raglan tee. Raglans were obviously pretty cool back then. They're not as popular as they are now, but this 1980 Van Halen t-shirt was probably seen all over the United States at the time, as Van Halen was super big. Then here in this shot, we see this Tom the Mongoose McEwen drag racing t-shirt. Tom the Mongoose McEwen was a big-time Hall of Famer drag racer. And here we see this Hot Rod tee, which was pretty popular at the time in the 70s and the 80s. Oftentimes, these designs would have been like ironed on, but this one appears to be an actual screen print. Look at this kid in a Ralph Lauren green knit sweater. Ralph Lauren was still sort of a preppy designer at the time and hadn't quite gotten into streetwear like his designs would become in the 1990s, but this is a cool little piece of Ralph Lauren history right here. Then we have Big Brother Brad and his buddy, who is actually played by Nicolas Cage, wearing these two super cool mesh trucker hats, one by Cat Diesel Power and the other John Deere. I would expect that John Deere hat is probably the most valuable John Deere hat on the market, if you could find the actual one he wore. If you do, call me because I might be interested. Then we have Jeff Spicoli making his big grand entrance, and look what his buddy is wearing right here. I can't tell what the first pair of jeans is, but the second pair is clearly a pair of Levi's, probably a 501. This classroom scene is chock full of vintage tees. Take a look at this guy here wearing the Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers t-shirt, or this guy back here in the back wearing the Alice Cooper Madhouse Rock t-shirt. Then we have this young lady wearing the Jimmy Buffett and the Reefers t-shirt. All the examples I've ever found of this t-shirt always have the graphic on the back and a little graphic on the front. But you can see later on in other scenes that the little graphic on her t-shirt is on the back and the main graphic is on the front. I wonder if she was wearing this t-shirt backwards to show off the graphic to the camera. Then we have this young guy right here sniffing his test paper, wearing the Ted Nugent Scream Dream t-shirt. This was actually Ted Nugent's like 6th album. Who knew? Then in the cafeteria, you can see one of the guys sitting here at the table wearing a pair of Wrangler jeans. Now we have Rat, one of our main characters, clearly wearing a t-shirt with an iron-on graphic. Iron-ons were very popular at the time. You could order them out of Rolling Stones and put them onto any t-shirt you wanted. Rat is wearing an iron-on from the movie Popeye that was released in 1980, and it featured the late, great Robin Williams. And here we have Brad washing his most prized possession in some Levi's 501s, clearly taking a page out of one of his favorite musical artists, Bruce Springsteen. You can see he has a Bruce Springsteen sticker on the back of his car, who famously wore 501s on the cover of his Born in the USA album. Now here in the second classroom scene, we have one of the most important moments in the film for fashion, and we're about to get to it. But first, check this guy out here wearing the Journey Escape album t-shirt, mostly hidden under his overshirt, but a still pretty cool t-shirt. Then just a few moments later, we have this Michael Schechner Group band t-shirt that comes into frame. Curiously enough though, in this same scene, this guy wearing that shirt will change shirts and have a completely different shirt on in a moment. Now here we have Jeff Spicoli ushered into the classroom, and one is tempted to pay more attention to the bagel in his pants versus the shoes in his hands. But it's the shoes in his hands that we are interested in, and that's because these are the Vans checkered slip-ons. Vans was a decently sized company that was growing in popularity in Southern California at the time, but the Vans company themselves attributes this movie for rocketing them into international superstardom in shoe wear. In fact, it was actually reported that it was Sean Penn's decision alone to feature the checkered Vans so prominently in the film. I'm certain that the Vans brand has thanked Sean Penn ever since for the prominent featuring of the Vans checkered slip-on, because they became so infamous and so popular after this movie. Now back to the mall, where we have this kid wearing a Led Zeppelin tee. I have some research that suggests that this t-shirt might have been a parking lot bootleg, but even if it wasn't, clearly this kid has the 80s riz down. Also want to point out Mike's scarf here. This piano scarf, pretty interesting. It's pretty prominently featured throughout the film, and turns out you can actually still find them on eBay. Then here in a blink and you'll miss it moment, we have the Ming the Merciless t-shirt from the Flash Gordon series. You can hardly tell it's there, but we were able to figure it out. I wish this t-shirt was featured more in the film. This is the only time that you actually see it. Now we're going back to Mike Damone and his shoes, actually. Let's take a look at his shoes up here on his desk. Those are Nikes, but they're not any of the Nikes you might have thought they were. They're actually Nike wrestling shoes. This kid is wearing wrestling shoes as his everyday beaters. Definitely fits his personality. Then we have Rat bursting through the door wearing the Leigh denim jacket. Hard to see, but you can basically make out the Leigh logo on the pocket. Now let's stop here for just a moment and appreciate Sean Penn's wardrobe. What a cool guy. This guy could fit on any college campus any day right now wearing this outfit. This is the prototype for hipsters, even though he's portraying a California stoner surfer. This is such a dope fit. No brands are IDing information on these garments. Then we need to pause again and appreciate Sean Penn's jacket right here. What a cool jacket. This Sherpa lined, like carpet design jacket. I have searched high and low for anything resembling it and haven't been able to find it, but definitely a super cool piece of clothing here. Would love to own something like this myself one day. Now back in the classroom, you can kind of tell some of these kids are wearing the same clothes from previous days and previous months, but way back in the back you can see a new t-shirt we haven't seen yet, and you can see some red lettering. We believe this is the AC/DC Back in Black tour from 1980. It doesn't get featured very prominently in this film, but it's there. Just hard to see. Now if you pause it right here, you can see there is a Billy Joel Summer of 1980 tour raglan t-shirt. These t-shirts actually can be had for pretty decent prices. We weren't able to find the exact colorway, but we found it in other colorways. Billy Joel, not the most popular today, but if you're looking for one of these t-shirts, you can get it on the cheap. Now here in this scene, we have two t-shirts we want to point out, and one is the Nike t-shirt. Nike hadn't quite hit its heights yet. Michael Jordan was still waiting in the wings, and pretty soon that would have blown up for Nike. But we have another t-shirt here in the back, and this fantasy-looking, like space sailing ship. This one stumped us for a while, and we had to call in some backup. We called our friends over at defunct.com, and they put the word out on their Instagram, and they helped us find an owner of another one of these t-shirts. Our now friend Second Planet Vintage had a copy of this t-shirt, and gave us some good reference photos to examine it. Turns out it's a 1975 Roach print. Now, Roach was mostly known for their iron-ons, but they did have some screen-printed t-shirts. The one in the movie appears to be screen-printed, and the one example that we found also appears to be screen-printed. So thanks for the assist, Defunct.com. They are the central place for vintage t-shirt enthusiasts. I highly encourage you to go check out their website. They have an incredibly huge archive of t-shirts that helped us find some of these t-shirts in this film. And here we have one of the most notorious, and that is the Sex Wax t-shirt worn by Sean Penn. Another wardrobe win for him. Somehow he thought it was a good idea to wear this t-shirt to a mortuary and a hospital, but he's never been accused of having good judgment. Now, Sex Wax, besides getting me some weird looks from my wife, is a surfboard wax company from Southern California. They knew the name would be provocative, and it certainly was, and it is certainly provocative in this scene right here. This t-shirt is pretty dope. It's the long sleeve version. There are short sleeve versions of this same t-shirt. You can find this t-shirt for about 75 bucks, which is pretty cool to have a t-shirt that Sean Penn wore. Then, as the students are leaving the hospital, we have the Sex Wax t-shirt again and the Buzzcocks t-shirt here. The Buzzcocks being a punk band from the late 70s and early 80s. Both of these guys showing excellent judgment wearing these t-shirts to a hospital. Then we have a t-shirt that kind of threw me off, and that's this tuxedo t-shirt. I thought tuxedo t-shirts were a thing of the modern Spencers or Hot Topic, but it turns out they were not. They are actually an artifact of the 80s. We have one featured prominently. You can still pick up the vintage ones for a couple bucks. Now for the final scene, and one of the most infamous scenes in 80s film history. This scene features two super dope t-shirts. One is worn by Jeff Spicoli here. It is the Colt 45 Drunk Horse t-shirt on the yellow t-shirt. This one gets a lot of reprints, and original ones are actually pretty difficult to find. So this is also the scene where we get awesome, totally awesome. Because these t-shirts clearly are awesome. The other t-shirt worn by Brad is the Bruce Springsteen The Jersey Devil t-shirt. Again, another one because of the infamy of this scene that is reprinted a ton. Finding an original can be rather difficult. Now, these two t-shirts will cap us off on a totally awesome journey through 1980s vintage clothing. Let us know what other movies we should do in the future, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.